everybody, and welcome to another episode of Clarity in the Chaos, in which we attempt to bring some vertical clarity into the midst of our horizontal chaos. You know, there are a lot of messages in our world today, and we have to decipher between what is right and what is true, and from what is wrong and what is going to lead us to a dark place. The book of Proverbs was written to give a young man and to give us today real clarity, so that as we venture out into our world, that we are not led astray, that we don't believe everything that's said, and we know how to separate out what is wise and what is true from what is error and what is going to lead our heart in a bad place, into a place of error. So today from Proverbs 16, we find some verses where we're given some clear instructions on how to recognize and separate those voices. The voice of those without hope, who have no reliance upon God, who have no faith. They have a motive in what they do that comes from the sorrow and sadness and darkness in their own heart, and they have mannerisms in how they do it. In other words, they have an attitude and they have actions. They have a reason for what they do, and they have a way that they walk in. And so the writer of Proverbs writes to help us recognize the motive, but also the mannerisms, so that, one, we're not led astray, but also that we don't become like them, that we don't do what they do. Even though we might start off with sincere motivation, we have to be careful that we don't walk in the way that they walk and communicate in the way that they do. So with that said, let's jump into verses 27 through 30. We find 8 ways here that those without hope spread the hate that's in their heart, and how to recognize that and how to avoid that in our own lives. We start in verse 27. The verse says, "An ungodly man digs up evil." Those without hope, those without God in their life, they have a fascination with wanting to bring about, expose, find more evil. They're at a place where they have no peace and no joy, no life, and there's something about that for them that drives them to dig up more of that. An association with others who find that and wanting to expose that the world is terrible, others are terrible, so they look to bring up more terrible, more evil. I want to find more evil, and they dig for it. They search for it. They map for it. This is what they view life as a game of. They are in pursuit of all things evil, not just so that they can experience it, but so that they can spread it. So they have glasses for their world that looks for what is wrong. And boy, this is a tempting thing for followers of Christ. We're called to see where there is evil and avoid it. We're called at times to speak out against it, but it is not our life course to live to be digging up evil, to be in search of evil, to point out everything wrong. Our goal is to point people to the goodness of Christ, to His glory, to His wisdom, to His wonder. So in all of our searching and digging, let us be pursuing wisdom. Let's dig for that treasure. Let's dig for what's right and true, and not be bent on digging up all that is wrong, all that is evil, all that is not of God. The second thing he says there in verse 27 says that what he digs up, he says, it's on his lips like a burning fire. Those who have no hope, they dig for the evil, and then once they discover it, once they discover what someone else has done that's not right, once they discover some evil that is alluring to them, they can't wait to talk about it. They can't wait to tell someone else about it. It's on their lips like a burning fire. They cannot wait to spread it. They find out something, they've got to tell somebody. And with it being a fire, it indicates that their intentions are not good. It burns, can't let it sit. I've got to say it. And then the intent is to tear down. I want to expose someone. I want to tear them down. I want to point out. I want to destroy reputation. I want to cause you to see them in a negative light. And this is what the enemy is bent on. He has been ever since he turned away from God himself. His heart became filled with jealousy and envy for the glory that God alone had. And the evil one is now bent on evil, digging it up, and it burns on his tongue. He has to tell someone. He has to point out. He's the accuser of the brethren. He's the one who is bent on destroying the character and reputation of God and the character and reputation of others. It burns like a fire in their tongue. The third thing it says in verse 28 says, a perverse man sows strife. We associate the word perverse with immorality here, and it definitely has a reference to that, but it's also a word that means to be twisted or distorted. The heart that is distorted, the heart that is out of its own place that it was designed to be, filled with glory and wonder and beauty, it's twisted instead with hate. It loves to sow strife. In other words, it plants seeds that call for a fight. I remember in high school watching the dynamics of people, students, and how one would say something to another and say, hey, did you know this person doesn't like you? Did you know this person said this about you? They are intending to sow strife, plant seeds to create a fight. And usually by the end of the week, if not by the end of the day, there was going to be a fight somewhere in the school, and everyone had rallied, even though the two people involved probably had not even talked to each other that day or that week. They got into fights because of what they heard others say. And this verse tells us that there are those who love to plant seeds that create a fight. They want to tell something about another person that'll create a little bit of angst, a little bit of tension. Can you believe this person did this? Can you believe this person said this? And they tell just enough information to create the conflict. They like to create the conflict and the tension and the sides and be on my side and come away from their side. Now, this is something, again, that we have to be careful that we not fall into in our actions. It may not be our motivation, but we have to be careful that in our actions and our mannerisms, we don't do that as believers. Also in verse 28, we see the fourth thing here. A whisperer separates the best of friends. This is a person who they love to come in and plant a seed of mistrust. Just a little whisper, a suggested word about another person. And did you know this about them? Did you know they said this the other day? And this happens even in our own thought processes about people. And when that happens, we can quickly recognize that those words are not from the Spirit of God, but they are from the enemy. Words that are designed to separate, to create doubt, to create uncertainty, to cause us to see another person with anything less than love, to think another person is unquestionable in all their motives, and begin to question our ability to trust them. This is what a whisperer does. He whispers enough thought, and a whisper suggests that they come in close, that they've come in very close to us, and they're suggesting their allegiance to us, and they whisper it. And this draws us in as though we want to hear, because it's so secretive and it's so singled out for us. Verse 29 goes on, it says, a violent man entices his neighbor. He seeks to draw him in. He wants to draw him close. Again, it begins from a place of anger and bitterness and hate. And he uses his words, he uses his mannerisms, he uses his speech to draw the person in, to entice them, to draw them close. They've got something they want to accomplish, and they use their news to try to entice and bring in and draw close, create enough distrust in others, and create enough trust in themselves that you'll listen to no one else but them. And also in verse 29 it says, and lead him in a way that is not good. They're leading you down a path. They're leading you in a purpose, in a course, in a direction. This is what the ungodly do, it says, the perverse, the whisperer, the violent man. They have an intention. They have a plan. They have a plot. And you have to be wise to not fall for the plot and to be wise to not take up the same pattern that they use. Finally, in verse 30, we see number 7. It says, he winks with his eye to devise perverse things. Now, at this point, he has led the other person in, brought them in close, whispered to them, suggested to them, enticed them over to their side. And then he's able to just use his eye to wink. He can indicate approval, disapproval with simply a wink. He's already won with his words, and now he's got their full attention into his eyes, and he can just direct them with a wink. And then at the end of verse 30, we see the ultimate goal here. He purses his lips and brings about evil. Now, in some parts of our country, but especially in other countries, there's a way that people direct others if they want to point them in a certain direction, and they use their lips. They purse them together and point with their lips. They do that just with a simple indication of their mouth. They don't have to say a word. They just make a quick indication with their lips, and they can point another person in the path that they want them to go. And so you see the subtlety of the ungodly and the perverse and those who have no hope. They want to spread their hopelessness, their anger, their hate. They insinuate, they create mistrust to the point where all that they have to do is simply with a wink or simply with a purse of the lips, they can guide you and direct you in the way they want you to go. It started by them digging for evil, and now they've used their motivation and their skill to draw someone in, and now they can direct them to go wherever they want. So the book of Proverbs tells us, recognize that, see that. Wherever you get your information about life, wherever you get the news that forms your opinion about life, notice where it comes from. Understand the source. Watch for these signs. And then let us, as followers of Jesus Christ, as followers of faith, let us not be like them in our motivations, and let us not be like them in our mannerisms. And when we do this, then we can be wise, we can be careful, and we can have clarity in the midst of our chaos.